Are you drowning in scrap fabrics and just don't know what to do with them? I know I have a lot of scraps right now. And one of the things that's always been hard for me is figuring out how to make a quilt with them that I know I will love. I struggle with picking out the scraps and making them all come together in a unified quilt. Now, I'm not saying I don't love a scrappy, crazy quilt. Sometimes I like making those too, but sometimes I'm just really in the mood for a quilt that is calm and all comes together beautifully. So today I'm going to share 2 ways that you can use your scraps to make a unified quilt. And then we're going to make a beautiful scrappy quilt block together. So here's a sample I made with 4 of those quilt blocks that I'm going to be showing today. And this is a truly scrappy version of the quilt block that we'll be making. Now to make this block, you're going to need 2 accent fabrics. I chose white and black, and then you're going to need some light scraps of fabric and some darker scraps of fabric. So you'll want to divide those out. And I'm going to show you how I went about doing that. When I'm working with my scraps, I started deciding that there's 2 different ways that I can go about this. I can either make it truly scrappy, or I can make it more of a controlled scrappy. So this one I would consider more of a truly scrappy version. And how I choose my fabrics when I'm going this way is I'll pick one that has a lot of different colors on it. So in this instance, I chose this fabric for my scrap bin first. Now here I didn't need a ton of fabrics because I knew I was only going to make 4 blocks. It was just going to be a sample. So you would just keep expanding on this with more and more fabrics if you need to, if you're making a 16 block quilt, which I'm going to show later. So I started with this fabric here. It really caught my eye. It has a lot of different colors in it. It has some greens, some blues, and some yellows. And then when I was going through my scrap bin, I found this fabric here, and I actually think it may be from the same line. I'm not sure, but it had some greens in it. It still had some reds, so I felt like it worked. Then I came across this green, and I really liked the texture of it. So I felt like this would go in well, and it pulls in the greens from both of them, which is nice. And then I came across these reds, and there's reds in both of the flowers, so they worked as well. So then you would just keep doing that. If you needed more fabrics than that, you would just keep pulling more and more fabrics. Just make sure they're darker than your light fabrics that you're going to pull as well. For me, when I am making a scrappy quilt that I really want to look unified and controlled, I make sure that I have some sort of accent fabric in that quilt that is going to always be the same throughout every block. I feel like it really helps bring a scrappy quilt together. So when you pull your 2 accent fabrics, try to make sure you have at least a ½ yard of each to make the 16 block quilt if you're making a quilt that large with me. So if that is still too scrappy for you, there is also a controlled way that you can go about using your scraps, and that's by choosing one color. This is honestly one of my favorite ways to make a scrappy quilt. You can see behind me I have a blue scrappy quilt. I pretty much always have a ton of blue scraps because it seems that that is the color of fabric that I end up purchasing the most. So I have an endless supply of blue scraps. So when I'm choosing one color for this quilt, I'm still looking for that darker fabric and lighter fabric. So I went through my scrap bin and pulled out all of my dark blue fabrics and all of my light blue fabrics. So here are the fabrics that I found, and then I'm using those same accents as with the sample. I have the black fabric and the white fabric. So this quilt block is pretty easy to make, and it is so fun to make. It's kind of like a log cabin block meets a courthouse steps block, and they kind of merge together with a little bit of a pineapple block. It is a really, really fun block to make. I'll put up on the screen what cuts you need to make this block, and it'll be just for one block, but on my blog I'll put up all of the cutting instructions for a quilt that has 16 of these blocks in it. To make it really easy, if you're making the 16 block quilt, I found that it was best to cut all of your light and dark fabrics into 2-inch strips and then cut those down as you needed them when you were building the block. That way you could make sure that you like the color placement before you committed to making all 16 blocks. The first thing you'll want to do is make that center square in a square. So you're going to take your accent fabric and you're going to put the triangles on opposite ends of it and sew them in place. To do that, I like to fold my square in half so I make sure I line up everything properly. Because you see those triangles are going to overhang on the end. So if I get that crease there, I can also crease my triangles. Just fold it in half and crease it, and then you'll get them to line up perfectly. So you'll get the same amount of overhang on each side, and you know that it's going to be a perfect square when you're done. So just sew a 1/4-inch seam across there. And then do the same thing with the other side. All right, press those seams. And then you're going to do the same thing with the other side. So fold your square in half. And then crease it so that you can put on the final 2 triangles. All right, and then press the seams. All right, and then your square in a square block is done. If you're going to make all 16 blocks for this quilt, you can go ahead and get them all done now just so that they're ready to go for all of your blocks. I am going to go ahead and trim this down. I don't like having all of the little fabric sticking out from the, ears from those triangles, but you don't have to. As long as it's 3.5 inches, you can keep it like this if you want to. All right, so now that our center square is done, here you can really see the layout for this block. The darker fabrics are all going to be in one corner and our lighter fabrics. We're going to have 3 dark fabrics that are on the opposite side of 3 light fabrics, and they're not going to have any accents on them. And then the 3 dark fabrics are on the opposite side of the 3 light fabrics that all have accents on them. So that's a quick and easy way to make sure you're assembling this block properly. It's built like a courthouse steps, but we have the placement of the fabrics where it kind of looks like a traditional log cabin with a light side and a dark side. But then we have these triangle accents that we're going to add that kind of has that look of a pineapple block. It's such a fun block to make. So what we're going to add on first here is our dark 3.5-inch strip and our light 3.5-inch strip. And again, they're going to go to opposite sides of each other, and neither of them are going to have that accent fabric on it. So I'm going to lay my darker strip here, right sides together on that square in a square block that we made with the accent fabrics, and we're just going to sew a 1/4-inch seam across here. And then we'll just add that lighter fabric on the other side. All right, and then I'm just going to press the seams. All right, and so this is how it looks after that first round. And this is how it comes together like a courthouse step block, because we have opposing sides on each other. And then the next strips that are going to go on are 6.5-inch strips, and they're going to have the accents on it, but they are opposite to each other. All right, so this is how your accent strips are going to come together. I am using a black and a white accent. We'll call the black accent accent 1 and the white accent accent 2, just in case you're using different colors than I am. So Your accent number 1, which is the black accent here, is going to be always on the left side of the strip. And it's always going to be sewn from the bottom left corner up to the top right corner. So it's going to allow for the edge closest to you when you're sewing to be wider, and then the top edge is going to be narrow, because accent number 2 is always going to be on the right side of the strip, and it's always going to be sewn from the bottom right corner up to the top left corner. So it'll always be narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. So if you wanted to, you could draw that angle from corner to corner with a pencil or any other writing utensil you have. But I'm going to use the diagonal seam tape to stitch across there so I don't have to draw on the wrong side of all these fabrics. All right, so using the diagonal seam tape, I'm just going to line up the corner with the red on the diagonal seam tape. Now that red line is lined up with the needle, so I know I'll be able to sew right across here. So I'm keeping those 2 points of those angles lined up on the red seam tape. And I'm just going to sew right across there. So here is where that line of stitches is. Now I'm going to do the same thing across here. So I'm going to line up my point with the red seam tape, have it lined up, and that is where my needle is lined up, so I can sew right across there. All right, so I'm just going to trim about 1/4 inch away from those stitches. So here is the accent strip all pressed. So again, all of the accent strips are assembled in that same manner. To continue assembling the block, we'll just add on those 6.5 inch strips with the accents onto the opposite sides of this block that we're building. So that wider edge is what we're going to ensure is being sewn on. All right, press. All right, so here's the block so far. Here's where I feel like it gets really easy, because the next strips you're going to add on are 6.5 inches, and you're going to automatically know that one of the strips is going to go right on with the dark fabric and the light strip with the light fabric, and neither of them have accents, so it's going on with where we put the 3.5 inch strip. So it just builds out really easy from here, because your strips without the accents always line up on the side without the accents. Here's the block so far. Now we're adding on the 9.5 inch strips with the accent fabric. So line up the dark fabric with the dark side and the light fabric with the light side. So easy from here. All right, so here's the block so far. And then we're adding on our 9.5 inch strips that don't have the accent on them. All right, so here is the block. We just have 2 more sides to sew on, and they are 12.5 inch strips with accents. Oh my goodness, how cute is this scrappy block? I absolutely love it. I have 4 of these blocks done so far. I'll put how they look together up on the screen. But I have all the fabric cut and organized for 12 more blocks. So in my next video, hopefully sometime next week, I'm going to show you how I'm going to quilt this quilt when it comes together with all 16 blocks. Hopefully you'll make some of these blocks and maybe have some ready to come quilt with me then. If you are making any of these blocks, I'd love to see what fabrics you're using from your scrap stash. You can share photos with me in the new community tab here on YouTube. I'd love to see what you make. So this smaller scrappy version of this quilt, I already have all the way finished. It's quilted and bound. Now the way I quilted this was so simple. I just did some straight line quilting and did, well, what is it called? Is it a crosshatch design? I'm going to do something very simple on the larger version of this pattern that I'm doing. So be sure to tune in. It'll give you some more ideas on how to quilt this quilt once you finish it. I hope you have so much fun using up your scraps with this fun block. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.